This presentation is to address the emotional poverty that is so prevalent, especially during the challenges of COVID-19. Our Pathway to Independence class is for those who are struggling in poverty. The criteria for the class includes a person's financial resources. However, throughout the class, we take a look at 11 different resources that can impact a person and their family. Our emotional resource is among the most important resources that we need. Today, we want to take a look at how COVID has impacted that resource in our lives, causing an emotional poverty for many. You'll hear from a few different speakers, and I hope that they're helpful to you in the struggles that you've been experiencing. When I asked you what your biggest struggles were during the challenges of COVID, here are some of the things that you shared. Internet problems and the lack of technology while trying to change to online schooling for your children. Activities that were canceled or aren't the way that they used to be. Not feeling free to do the things that you want to do. Bills that are adding up. Extra money that is needed. Not having essentials such as food. When having kids with special needs, it's been especially difficult to go to online schooling because some kids can't learn sitting in front of a computer all day. For one person, having a newborn and not being able to have family come over or not at all to help, delivering a baby alone in the hospital with no visitors allowed was hard as well. Having a 4-year-old who doesn't understand why she can't go play at the park like she used to or go and play with friends. Some people manage by doing other indoor fun activities, and they may have a swing set or something in the backyard that they can use, but they've expressed how they realize that not all families are that fortunate. No Christmas programs at school or at church, not being able to take pictures with Santa. We've all been affected by things that have changed for us during this time. Isolation, loss of jobs, struggles with online schooling, the loss of time with family and friends, all of these have contributed to our emotional resource. And when you have low emotional resources, you're not able to handle your feelings well. And this can damage family relationships. It can create patterns of behavior that work against us and have negative consequences, such as addictions. It can affect our jobs, school, every area of our lives. It can make us feel less than or separate from. No matter how successful a person may be, their internal understanding is that they're not enough. In order for you to live well and to live a fulfilled, happy life, to not remain silent or at a standstill or to go backwards, you need to take a look at your emotional resource and see where you're at, what struggles you might have, and how to address them in a healthy, positive way. We wanted to offer this presentation to our past Pathway graduates, as well as our current Pathway participants, and really anyone can benefit from this information. It's a collaboration between the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, the Way Station, Job and Family Services, who provide funding for our Pathways program, and area mental health peers and professionals. So let's get started with our speakers who will be sharing some things that you can do during times of anxiety and stress, and community resources that are there and available to help.
The last 10 months have been anything but normal. With the coronavirus pandemic has come unexpected and prolonged isolation. Many have suffered financial loss and physical concerns. Many have lost employment. Families have faced the complications that come with school closings. Worship services have been disrupted. Basically, every aspect of our lives have been impacted. So the question is there a way to not lose hope or not be overcome with anxiety, worry, and fear during all that's going on in our world today? Well, the short answer is yes, there is. And over the next few minutes, I'd like to share that way with you. With any problem in life, how we view it is critical. Imagine standing outside on a sunny day, a quick glimpse up into the sky, and you get a view of how huge the sun is. However, if you close one eye and hold your hand up between your open eye and the sun, you won't be able to see the sun. Even a small object like your hand can block out the enormity of the sun. So it is with issues in our lives. If we look at God through our problems or circumstances, often we can't see him. But if we focus on God, we're reminded he's bigger than anything that comes into our lives. So, ask yourself the next time you begin to worry or fear, what am I focusing on? God or my problems? Now, I'm not saying that will take the problems away, but it will impact how you view the situation. And your worries and fears can begin to subside as you focus on the one who is in complete control. In the Old Testament book of Isaiah, there is a verse that catches this concept perfectly. Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3 says this, "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you." Listen, God is sovereign in all things. This current global crisis did not take God by surprise. But if we get our lives out of focus, the problems, the troubles, the cares of this world can easily rob us of peace and joy and hope. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5 says this, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand." We need the assurance of the gift of God's presence in times such as these to help us overcome the loneliness that comes through this time of isolation and uncertainty. God promises us in the book of Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5 that he will never leave us or forsake us. As a child of God, you never face anything in this life alone. In the book of Psalms, the 121st chapter, the 4th verse, "The God of Israel never slumbers or sleeps." I encourage you, turn to him during this most difficult time. He is always available and will never turn you away.
I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about emotional stress and how we can handle that, what we can do to deal with our stress and better manage our stress so that it doesn't have significant impact on our lives. So the first step in managing emotional stress is to recognize it. And that may even mean naming it for what it is. You know, I am feeling stressed today. And then eventually taking the next step and determining why. So sometimes we take on emotional stress that is not ours to take on, and it's important to realize that so that we can really just deal with our own stuff, you know. So today I want to talk about ways to handle that stress, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about comes from Mark Terrell and Lisa Hone, and you can find them on YouTube. They have a lot of different teachings that might be helpful to you. Part of dealing with emotional stress is developing resilience, and each of us has the ability to develop resilience, develop that ability to bounce back, to overcome, to not be just so pushed down by our circumstances that we can't function. And so the first part of developing resilience is to understand the raw fact that suffering is part of life. It just is. Sometimes in our worlds, we get on Facebook, we get on Instagram, and we look around and we see all these perfect lives. And we don't acknowledge the fact that we are seeing one dimension of a life. And it does not matter who you are. if you are human, you will suffer. You will suffer loss, maybe job loss, maybe loss of someone you love, or a relationship, or loss of health. You name it. You know what we suffer. We just do. And so the first step in developing resilience is to recognize that everyone suffers. The universe is not out to get you. It's just part of life. Life is sometimes incredibly beautiful and sometimes incredibly hard. And then it's incredibly beautiful again. So that's number one. Number two is to learn the art of benefit finding. So when something difficult happens, sometimes we make the mistake of losing what we still have to what we lost. And so what I mean by that is the ability that we could have to still recognize things that are good even when things are tough. And it's not a Pollyanna-ish thing. That is just recognizing that there's always still something good. And how we develop that is by practice. And so we can just throughout our days, find 3 things in a day that has been good for you. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Like one of my things today is that because this is taped and I'm not standing in front of you, I get to wear my pajama pants. I love to wear my pajama pants. And so that's my good thing today. One of them, anyways. So yes, looking for the benefits in each day will help build resilience, which will in turn help you deal with your emotional stressors. The last thing is that resilient people, they know what to focus on. And that comes from asking a couple of questions. The first one is what I'm about to do going to harm me or help me? We all have coping mechanisms, and some of those are good and healthy, and some of those are mediocre and not terrible, and then others are downright destructive, And so asking the question, is what I'm about to do going to help me or harm me, is very important. The last question there is, what can I do and what do I not have control over? Resilient people focus on what they can do, and they don't spend all their time thinking about all the things that they cannot do anything about. So those are all ways to develop resilience, which will positively impact your emotional stress. The other thing that I would like to mention is that it's helpful to recognize where the stress is coming from. All of us have needs. We have needs for connection, we have needs for safety, and we have needs to make a difference. So sometimes we need to say, am I feeling stressed because I'm lonely? Is this time impacting me in such a way that I can't have the friendships that I typically would enjoy and would fill me up? And do I need to find another way to meet that need? The other question is, am I afraid? We all have this need to feel safe, and so sometimes the stress comes from our fear, and it's hard to know what to do with that fear. And that kind of goes back to what I talked about a little earlier about recognizing what we can and can't do, and letting go of the stuff that we cannot do. And then sometimes we just need to say, is something missing? We all have this this need to recognize that our mind, body, and soul are all connected. And so sometimes we experience more stress because our bodies aren't moving. We're not exercising, or we're not walking, or getting out, things like that. And then we all have, a need to have a purpose. and that can change throughout our lives. But if we can figure out right now what our purpose is, whether that is to do your job as best as you can, or to, work with your kids and their schoolwork as best as you can, or teach your children to be resilient. All of us need to kind of discover what that purpose is, and that will help, because some of our stress sometimes comes from that. So I hope these thoughts were helpful to you.
Today, what I'm talking about is maintaining healthy relationships for couples and families during the time of COVID, the pandemic. And a lot of times when I see couples and families, I feel like they would like it if I had a magic wand. And really, I would like that too, because then everybody could get fixed really easily. But that's not realistic. A lot of times I feel like individuals would like it if I could give them a formula. If you do A, B, and C, then everything will be okay and you'll get the desired result. But that's not realistic either. If I was the only one in charge of my relationships, everything would be perfect because I would get exactly what I wanted. But with relationships, why doesn't it work having a formula? And I'll tell you why. Because it involves more than one individual. And what that means is you have two people with two different backgrounds, two different histories of hurt or trauma or loss. You have different expectations. You have different personalities. You may have different values. Each one may want different things. So therefore, you have less control. And what I find is if I introduce control in a relationship, because we all like to be in control, that is bringing an unhealthy element into the relationship. The more I try to control, the more I will push that person away from me. And I'm putting a wedge in that relationship. It is much more healthy to accept an individual where they are and to allow them to be. Now that is very difficult. But we're kind of in that situation right now with COVID, because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of concern about the future, there's a lot of fear. And we all try to control things in our own way. But the reality of it is we have very little control. So the goal is, first of all, to be aware of how you handle it with your partner or your family, whether you lash out or whether you shut down. So be aware of how you handle it. Be aware of your feelings. It's like, what am I afraid of? What's really going on inside of me? What am I angry about? What am I frustrated about? And then to talk or somehow acknowledge your feelings and express them to someone that in your family that is willing to listen. It's like, take this time to invest in your family and to be there and to support one another. Talk about your concerns. Talk about your feelings. And again, this is not an easy thing to do. If these concepts and principles were easy, we'd see a lot more happy, healthy people. Another thing is important to do is to focus on what you do have control over. If I focus on COVID, if I focus on other people, if I focus on everything that's going on in the world, I'm not focusing on what I can do. And that is, to me, has been a key element in my life. I can only control my attitude. I can only control my actions. I can only control my choices. I cannot control other people's choices. And the more I focus on what I can do, it helps me to feel less uncertain, less anxious, and more empowered. And it also gets my focus off of the negativity onto something that I can do to help myself. One thing I do, and this will help me not only in any relationship, but it also helps my self-esteem, is I concentrate on my self-talk. And self-talk is, what do you tell yourself? Do you say things to yourself like, I can't believe how stupid I am? Do you say things like, what's the point anyway? What's the purpose? It's not going to matter anyway. There's no hope. Why bother? All of these things are very negative. And you have to begin to take those things out of your vocabulary and replace them with things that are more hopeful and will help with the anxiety. One thing my husband and I do every day is we do the happy sad. And what this is at the end of the day, when we're together, we share our sad note for that day and our happy note. Meaning, what happened that day that made you sad? What happened that day that made you happy? In this way, you can kind of emotionally connect to one another and feel connected. Now, that doesn't mean we take it out on one another. Sometimes what is his sad may be my happy, or vice versa. We don't use it to beat one another up, but we use it to just share. And it doesn't have to be what happened between you as a couple, but it could be something that happened at work, when you're in the car, anything. So what happened that day to make you sad, and what happened that day to make you happy? Another thing we've been really working on with COVID is to be grateful. And sometimes when I am really bummed out, I just think of, okay, I may not have this, Daryl, and I may not have that, but what do I have? And to appreciate what you do have, to appreciate every single day, and to just think about what you can be grateful for. Sometimes it's important to see the lightheartedness in life, or the special times that you can just laugh about something with your family. It's important to have something to look forward to, whether it's a special meal or a time to be with your family, maybe a puzzle or a movie to watch. But it's important, especially during these times of high anxiety, to have something to look forward to. The other thing I want to mention very briefly is my faith. My faith has brought me through a lot of times of struggle and a lot of times of extreme disappointment and loss. And I'm not going to push my faith on you. But during these times, it is important to have faith because it gives you hope, it gives you meaning and purpose in life.
I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about mental illness and the relationship it has with the COVID pandemic that we're all facing right now. First of all, I'd like to start out with showing you 9 common signs of mental illness. And I'll define mental illness as a health condition that's characterized in changes in thinking, mood, behavior, or some combination of those 3. It's often associated with stress, and it can lessen a person's ability to function in everyday life. And the thing we have to understand about mental illness is that there's different levels of mental illness, just as there's different levels of other illnesses that affect the body, from mild to moderate to more severe. And if you or a friend or a loved one doesn't seem to quite be feeling like themselves during this COVID situation, well, then maybe you need to understand a little bit more about the differences between just being in a bad mood or being sad and something much more serious going on. One of the most common signs of a mental illness, is a feeling of anxiousness or being worried. Now, these signs and symptoms of mental illness often last longer than just a temporary short amount of time. So if you suddenly find yourself or someone that you care about feeling more anxious or more worried about the situation that you're currently in because of COVID, it could be a warning sign that mental illness is occurring. Feeling depressed or unhappy or sad oftentimes refer to as feelings as hopelessness. Sometimes we feel sad, but when we're talking about mental illness, it usually lasts longer than 7 to 10 days. and can affect your ability to function in everyday life. Emotional outbursts. If we find that we're suddenly irritated or agitated more easily than usual, and we have problems controlling some of those signs, it can be a sign of mental illness in a person's life. Oftentimes, sleep problems can occur with somebody dealing with a mental illness. Maybe you're feeling more tired than usual. Maybe you're having problems sleeping at all and experiencing some insomnia. We can have changes in our weight and in our appetite. Maybe we suddenly find ourselves wanting to eat everything in sight to help us feel better and give us a source of comfort. Or maybe we've lost all connection with our appetite. We don't feel hungry at all, which both of these can lead to either excessive weight gain or weight loss. And that's not just usually with one day at a time, but that's usually over an extended period of time. If you suddenly find somebody that you care about or yourself, you're feeling very quiet and withdrawn, that could be a sign of mental illness. Maybe you've lost interest in the things that you used to enjoy doing, such as reading or watching a good movie or going for a walk or just talking and visiting with friends. And you can still visit with friends, even if you can't do it in the same situations that we're used to. Substance abuse can often be a sign of mental illness. If there's an increased amount of substance use, any kind of chemical that you put into your body that changes your thinking, mood, or behavior can affect your mental health. So it's important to remember that, not to make things worse by using drugs or alcohol at this time to change your thinking, mood, or behavior, because that doesn't solve the problem. It can make things worse. Feeling very guilty or worthless. There's no sense in going on. All signs of mental illness. Changes in your behavior or your feelings. You're suddenly finding yourself more overwhelmed by situations. These are all signs that mental illness can be happening in a person's life. Now, please don't try to diagnose yourself or somebody else by what you're seeing here, because you need a professional to step in and to let you know if what you're dealing with really is a mental illness, or if it's just temporary due to the situation that we're all in with the COVID virus. If you think you're at risk or somebody you care about is at risk for suicide or self-harm, please be aware that you can get help by simply dialing 211, a program of Help Network of Northeast Ohio, and they will get you the help that you need. They're also a great resource of information for finding service providers that can tell you and help you to understand what you're dealing with and help you to feel better in life. If you're concerned about a friend or a loved one, or even about yourself, the important thing is to remember that it's okay to feel the way you're feeling and that it's okay to ask for help. You can let a friend or a loved one know that you're concerned about them. Ask them how long they've been feeling this way. Ask if there's something you can do to help. And it's okay to ask if they're feeling suicidal or if they feel like harming themselves. You can't put the idea of suicide into a person's head simply by asking the question. And remember, we come back to let them know it's okay to feel this way, and that asking for help is okay as well. Mental illness can be scary. It can be from the very mildest of symptoms and some episodes of depression, but it can be treated. And people can and do recover and live active and productive lives. Just like any other illnesses that affect the body, mental illness can be treated by support from caring, loving people, professionals to correctly diagnose the illness, sometimes medication, but not always, and learning how to better deal with the situation that you're facing. There are 6 common ways that we can help to feel better, ourselves to feel better during the coronavirus. Many of us are feeling anxious or overwhelmed at this time in our lives because we're facing something new. Change is not easy for people to deal with in any situation, and we've had to deal with a lot of change in the last year. We have an abundance of resources in Columbiana County, and you can access many of those resources by visiting the Columbiana County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board webpage. There's also information about mental illness And there's some very safe sites that you can visit to get some great information. One of them is through SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, also has great resources available, as does the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. If you have questions or you're feeling in crisis or overwhelmed by the situation, there is always the crisis text line, a great resource that we have available, open 24/7 for anyone who feels that they're in crisis. And you can see that information on your screen by texting for HOPE to 741-741, and someone will get back to you so that you understand you are not alone. And if you prefer to talk to someone in person, there's always help through Help Network of Northeast Ohio, and you can access that by dialing 211, and they will be there to support and encourage you and help you to access the resources you need for services. Ohio Care Line is also available, that has licensed professionals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can see that number on the bottom of your screen. Another great resource for you so that you understand that you are never really alone. I want to end up today by sharing something with you that has always helped me. You see, my name is Maureen Waybright, and not only am I recovery coordinator for the Columbiana County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, but I am also a person who lives with a mental illness. My illness is severe and persistent and affects my life each and every day. And dealing with the situations through COVID has had to increase my need to see a therapist more often. Oftentimes, I should say, I refer back to the Serenity Prayer. The first part of it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I cannot change the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic and that we have to deal with these ever-changing situations in our lives and how we exist and do things on a regular basis. Grant me the courage to change the things I can. I can change how I react to it. I wear my mask when I'm out in public. I try to keep my 6-foot social distancing. I wash my hands often. These are things that I can do to help change the situation for myself and for other people, but I can't make other people do it. And God grant me the wisdom to know the difference. You too can make a difference in your life. If you're feeling any of the signs of mental illness and you have any questions or concerns, the best thing you can do is talk to a professional. And you can find a list of professionals just by calling the 211 number and telling them that you need mental health services in Columbiana County, and they will provide you with that resource information, or you can visit the board webpage. Help is out there. You are not alone. I've often been asked, what is the worst kind of mental illness that is in society today? And my answer is always the same. The worst kind of mental illness is an untreated mental illness. People with mental illness can live active, productive lives and be happy in their life just like anybody else. The key is to grab a little piece of courage from inside and ask for the help that you need to deal with the symptoms that you're dealing with. Some mental illnesses may only last a brief period of time. Some may require treatment or medications and others do not. But you'll never know unless you take that first step and ask for the help that you need to deal with the issues you're facing every day. So I wish you all the best. I thank you for your attention. Have a great day.
I hope that the speakers were helpful to you. As I close out our time together, I would like to leave with a quote that I heard. We are all in the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. Each and every one of us has a different level of emotional resource, and that can even change from day to day. We have different past experiences, different current situations. Some of us have a large support group, and some have no support group at all. For some of us, COVID has been distant and not so real. For others, it has touched our lives in a very real and sometimes heartbreaking way. So as we weather this storm together, I ask that you be kind and respectful to those who have a different opinion or reaction to things than you do. Maybe try to see things through their eyes instead of being judgmental. Look for ways to encourage and support one another. One of my favorite things about our Pathways program is seeing the connections and friendships that are formed, seeing how you offer help and support to each other. Before COVID restrictions, as we sat together around the table, we learned about each other. We learned how and why others may see things differently. I'm looking forward to getting back to those in-person meetings around our table. If you're a Pathways participant, past or present, this counts as a class, and you can receive an incentive if you send me a private message with number 1, what was most helpful to you in this presentation? 2, what you personally have found to be helpful during these challenging times. And 3, what would you like to see us cover in the future? If you're not a current Pathway participant but would like to learn more about our program, message me and I'll give you a call. And let me share before we go, what I have found to be most helpful is through my spiritual resource that we have talked about in our class, that is one of our 11 resources. Well, mine is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. He is always there for me. He carries me through the ups and downs, through the emotional highs and lows. He is there. And I am thankful for that. If you'd like to hear more about that, please stop in the East Liverpool Way Station. See me or see Chris, and we would be glad to share more about our relationship with Jesus Christ. So thank you for watching this presentation, and God bless.
Jesus calls that new relationship with him being born again or being saved from our sins. That hope is available to anyone who recognizes that they are a sinner. Romans 3:23 says, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. That hope is available to anyone who realizes only Jesus can pay our sin debt. Acts chapter 4 and verse 12 says, nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. And that hope is available to anyone who repents of their sins and turns in faith to Jesus. Acts chapter 20 and verse 21 says, repentance toward God and faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Often, in times like these, we don't even realize what our needs truly are, but God does. And he will be faithful to supply your needs through all the chapters of your lives. He'll use his precious promises found in his word. He'll use other people, family and friends. He'll use the prayers of the faithful. And most importantly, he will use his love, his comfort, his strength, and his guidance. Won't you allow God to meet your needs by learning to lean on him and on one another in the days ahead? Today, God offers each of us his presence for your loneliness, his peace for your storms, his power for your weaknesses, and his provisions for your every need. Dear friend, as long as there is Jesus, there is hope. Remember Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3. God will keep you in perfect peace when your mind is focused on him.